By Emma, 32. There's a sting that comes with betrayal. It's sharp and sudden, like a needle piercing skin, and it doesn't go away. It leaves behind a scar, one that you may try to hide, but it's always there, a constant reminder. And when you find out that the one person you trusted the most, the one you thought was yours forever, has decided that someone else is worth more than you, that sting cuts deeper than anything you could have imagined. His name was Jake. We met in college. I was a shy, quiet girl, and Jake was everything I wasn't: outgoing, charming, with a smile that could light up any room. He seemed perfect. We spent nights talking, laughing, and sharing our hopes and dreams. By the time we graduated, I thought we had it all figured out. We moved in together right after graduation. We built a life, slowly but surely, filling it with memories. Weekend trips, anniversaries, small talks at the kitchen table over coffee. He made me feel like I was the one who mattered most to him. And for a while, I believed it. But things changed. At first, it was small. He started working late more often. He'd leave his phone face down, something he'd never done before. The excuses piled up: more meetings, more business trips. I tried to ignore the feeling that something was off, but it was always there, just beneath the surface, gnawing at me. I wasn't blind. I knew what was happening. And then I found out. I found the texts. A simple message. A name that wasn't mine. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you." I froze. I had no idea what to do. The feeling of betrayal hit me like a freight train, and suddenly everything around me seemed fake. Our life, the love I thought we had, was nothing more than a well-crafted illusion. I confronted him that night. He looked guilty, his face pale, his eyes shifting, as if he had no words to justify what he'd done. "Emma, it's not what you think," he said, his voice low, almost pleading. But it didn't matter. I already knew the truth, and I couldn't unsee it. "She's just someone I met," he continued, his voice cracking. "I never meant to hurt you." I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But I didn't. I just stood there, feeling numb. "You've hurt me more than you'll ever understand," I whispered, and walked away. I didn't cry that night. Not right away. I didn't know how to. But deep down, I knew that I couldn't let this go. A week later, he left. He moved out, taking his things, leaving me with our memories and nothing else. He didn't even fight me. He just walked out the door. The woman, of course, was named Rachel. I didn't need to know more than that. What mattered was that Jake had made a choice, and I wasn't the one he chose. And that's when I realized something. Jake had thought he could take everything from me: the man I loved, the life we built, everything I worked for, without any consequences. But I wasn't gonna let him get away with it. First, I took a deep breath. I let the rage simmer, but I didn't let it control me. I wasn't gonna make the mistake of acting in haste. No, this would be calculated, strategic. Because revenge, real revenge, was a game of patience. I started small. I took the one thing I knew would hurt him most: his job. Jake had worked his way up in the company, and the promotion he'd been gunning for was just around the corner. I made a few calls, anonymously at first, asking about the ethical issues I knew he'd been involved in. A few well-placed whispers. A couple of tip-offs to HR. It didn't take long for the rumors to spread. The more people heard, the more they started to question his integrity. And just like that, the cracks began to form. But I wasn't done. I knew Rachel was a part of the equation. She didn't know what she'd gotten herself into, but I was going to make sure she understood that the man she was so eager to claim had a history, one that was much darker than she ever imagined. I started with social media. Subtle things at first: old photos of Jake with other women. Text messages he'd sent me, messages that showed his true character. I wasn't attacking her directly, but I made sure she was aware. Her friends saw it. Her family saw it. And Rachel realized, just like I did, that Jake wasn't the man he seemed to be. And then came the final step. I waited until Jake was at his lowest. His career was on the line, his reputation shattered, and Rachel was beginning to question everything. I gave him one final piece of advice, and I made sure he knew who was behind it all. "You thought you could take everything from me," I told him, the words dripping with venom. "But you'll find out that no one gets to walk away unscathed." By the time I was done, Jake had lost it all: his job, his reputation, and most importantly, his sense of self. He tried to call me, tried to apologize, but I ignored him. I had already moved on. The life I was building was stronger, better. And in the end, he wasn't even a memory anymore. I had taken everything that mattered to him. And that was enough. It wasn't enough for me to just watch him fall. No, that wasn't the way of revenge I had in mind. Revenge, real revenge, isn't about the immediate satisfaction of seeing someone hurt. It's about watching them lose everything, slowly, painfully, until there's nothing left but the wreckage they created. I had to make sure Jake never saw it coming. I had to become the shadow in his life, the one that lingered in the background, pulling strings he couldn't see. After the final blow to his career, I knew he would try to bounce back. He had always been good at pretending everything was fine. It was one of the things I had once admired about him, his ability to put on a face, to fool everyone into thinking everything was under control. But this time, I wasn't gonna let him get away with it. He started reaching out to old contacts, trying to rebuild his network. He was desperate, and I could see it in every email he sent, in every phone call he made. But I was prepared for this. I had already laid the groundwork. I started with a quiet email to his old colleagues, those who had once respected him, who had once trusted him. Subject: concerned about past behavior. Dear name, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to reach out and share some concerns regarding Jake, last name, whom you may have worked closely with in the past. I've recently discovered some troubling information about his professional conduct and ethical standards. As someone who had worked with him in the past, I thought you might want to be aware of these developments before considering future collaborations. I've attached a few documents that might clarify the situation. Please feel free to reach out if you need further details. Best regards, Emma, last name. The emails went out quietly. No fanfare. No grand speeches. Just a few well-placed words to stir up the pot. I wasn't interested in ruining his career with a single strike. No, I wanted to watch him squirm, to feel the walls close in, bit by bit, until he had no place left to hide. Meanwhile, Jake tried to re-establish his connections. I watched from the shadows as he tried to rebuild his credibility, but it wasn't long before the first cracks appeared. One by one, people started distancing themselves. I'd see them unfollowing him on social media, deleting old photos. His LinkedIn profile, once full of glowing recommendations, now looked barren, untouched, like a ghost town. He started sending desperate texts to me. "Emma, please, I know I messed up. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I didn't respond. He didn't deserve my attention. Every time he reached out, I could feel the power shifting in my hands. One day, I received a message from Rachel, the woman he had left me for. The woman who had so eagerly slid into my place. She wasn't the villain in this story, she was just a pawn in Jake's game. But the way she reached out to me, it intrigued me. She apologized. She explained that she had no idea about Jake's past, that she had trusted him without knowing the real man underneath the charming smile. I listened. I didn't say much at first. I knew she was vulnerable, just like I once had been. "I know it doesn't mean anything now," she said, "but I just wanted to say that I'm sorry for everything you went through." And there it was. The moment when I realized the true extent of Jake's lies. It wasn't just that he had left me, it was that he had never been honest with either of us. I could see it now. Rachel, just like me, was another casualty of his manipulation. As the weeks went on, the final phase of my plan took shape. I made sure to keep my distance from Jake, but I also kept an eye on his every move. I knew he was trying to salvage whatever he could, but it was becoming increasingly clear that his reputation was beyond repair. I made one last move, and it was the most strategic yet. I reached out to the company that had once considered him for that big promotion. The same company that had nearly given him everything he wanted. I didn't send an email or make a phone call. No, I knew better than that. This time, I had something more subtle in mind. I arranged a meeting with one of the senior managers there, someone who had once worked with Jake. I didn't mention his name outright. Instead, I spoke about his history of ethical issues in the industry, the reputation for cutting corners, and the questionable behavior that had been swept under the rug. It wasn't a direct attack. It didn't need to be. I just let the truth slip out, little by little, until it couldn't be ignored. By the time I was done, Jake had nothing left. His reputation was in tatters, his career a distant memory. He tried to pick up the pieces, but it was too late. He couldn't salvage the wreckage. Not when the people who once believed in him had all turned their backs. Rachel, too, came to a realization. She started pulling away from him, distancing herself, and eventually she disappeared from his life. Jake's fall from grace was a slow, agonizing one. No drama, no loud accusations. Just the quiet hum of his life unraveling, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but a man who had lost everything he had once cared about. And me? I walked away from the ruins of our relationship with my head held high. I had my own life to rebuild, and this time I was doing it on my own terms. I didn't need Jake to define me anymore. His betrayal had set me free. To be continued. When I decided to take everything from Jake, it wasn't just about watching him crumble. It was about making sure that no one else ever fell for his charm, his lies, or his manipulation. I knew that if I let him rebuild without consequences, I'd be setting a dangerous precedent. I didn't want to be one of those women who looked back with regret, wondering what could have been done. I wanted Jake to remember me. To remember this day, this moment, forever. He tried to rebuild, but as I saw it, every attempt was just another failure in the making. He reached out to old contacts, tried to book meetings with potential clients, but he was met with resistance at every turn. His once vibrant network had withered to a husk. I knew it was working. Jake would never know the hands that were silently pulling the strings, orchestrating every setback, every fall. I waited, watched, and listened. I knew his every move, every step he took. The whispers about him were growing louder. I didn't need to do much anymore. People started talking on their own. I let the rumors grow. Slowly, quietly. They spread like wildfire. Jake was unreliable. Jake was untrustworthy. Jake was manipulative. And no one wanted to risk working with someone who had so many skeletons in their closet. Months passed, and I heard whispers about his new project. He was trying to relaunch his career in a different industry. But no one could forget his past mistakes. No one was willing to give him a second chance. I couldn't help but smile when I heard the news. The final bit of revenge hadn't come from me, it came from his own failures. From the very thing he thought would help him, his arrogance. He had been too busy chasing empty accolades and recognition, too blind to see that the things that truly matter in life, honesty, loyalty, and integrity, were the things he had given up when he chose her over me. And now, he had nothing left. The final straw came when I received a call from one of his former colleagues, someone who had once been close to him. She told me that Jake had lost his job. The company he had been trying to work with had let him go. They didn't give him a second chance. The damage was too great. I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel pity. All I felt was relief. By now, I had completely moved on. My life had flourished in ways I never imagined. I found new opportunities. I was free from the weight of the past, from the shackles that had once held me down. And Jake? He was still stuck, endlessly circling the drain he had created for himself. I never looked back. I had learned to live for myself, to value my own worth. But one day, months later, I ran into Jake at a coffee shop. I saw him before he saw me, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. The weight of failure had settled on his shoulders, and he wasn't the same confident, cocky man I had once known. He looked at me. His face twisted into a grimace, like seeing me was a reminder of everything he had lost. But instead of walking over to me, instead of trying to speak, he just stood there, frozen, watching me. I could have walked away. I could have ignored him. But instead, I smiled. I didn't need to say a word. My silence was more powerful than anything I could have shouted at him. I didn't need to destroy Jake. he had done that to himself. All I did was take away the power he had once held over me. I had become the woman I was always meant to be. Strong, independent, unshakable. And Jake? He was just a reminder of why I had to leave him behind. To be continued, the days drifted on, and life went from strength to strength. My career was flourishing, my social circle was expanding, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace with myself. I had healed from Jake's betrayal, and in doing so, had transformed into someone I didn't recognize, but in the best way possible. Then, one morning, I received a call that would change everything. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the voice on the other end was one I hadn't heard in a while. It was Jake's. "Hey," he said, his tone different from the cocky arrogance I once knew. There was a tremble in his voice. "I've been thinking about everything, and I—" Before he could continue, I cut him off. "You've been thinking about everything after all this time?" I let out a sharp laugh, trying to hold back the bitterness. "Jake, I don't think you're in a position to ask for anything, I know," he replied softly. "But I just wanted to apologize for everything, for leaving you, for everything I did. I thought I could handle it, but now I see how wrong I was." There it was, the apology. The one I had been waiting for, but only because I had wanted to feel validated. Only because I wanted him to suffer for what he had done to me. But now that it was here, I realized something. I didn't need it. Jake had made his choices, and I had made mine. I took a deep breath before responding. "You don't get to apologize now, Jake. You don't get to come back into my life. Just because things didn't work out the way you planned, you had your chance, you lost it." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. For a moment, I wondered if he had hung up. But then he spoke again. "I understand," he said quietly. "I just wanted to know if in time you could forgive me." I felt a strange calmness wash over me. I had spent so much time waiting for this moment, holding on to the hope that one day I would get the closure I needed. But now that it was here, I realized I had already moved on. I had already healed, and Jake's apology didn't matter to me anymore. "I don't need to forgive you," I said firmly. "Because you didn't break me, Jake. You only showed me who I really am. You showed me how strong I can be." I hung up the phone without waiting for a response. Months passed, and life continued to unfold in ways I never could have predicted. I met someone new. His name was Tom, and he was everything Jake wasn't. He was kind, thoughtful, and treated me with the respect I had always deserved. There were no games, no manipulation, no empty promises. It was simple, and it felt real. But every once in a while, I would think back to Jake. Not out of longing or regret, but out of understanding. He had been a part of my life for so long, and in some ways, he had shaped who I was. But I had changed. I had grown into someone better. Someone who didn't need the validation of a man who had betrayed her. One evening, after a long day at work, I received another message from Jake. This time it was just a simple line: "I'm sorry for everything." I read it. I stared at it. And then I deleted it. It was over. For the first time in years, I felt completely free. Free from the past, free from Jake, free from the hurt and the resentment that had once defined me. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I wasn't waiting for closure. I had everything I needed right in front of me. I had peace. And as I sat there, looking at my life and the way it had turned out, I realized that the best revenge wasn't about hurting Jake back. It wasn't about making him suffer. It was about becoming the woman I was always meant to be, strong, independent, and unapologetically myself. To be continued. I didn't see it coming, but I knew that somewhere deep down, it would all come full circle. Jake's texts, his attempts at contacting me, it wasn't about closure anymore. It was about him trying to find a way back into my life, just when everything was falling into place. He was clinging to the idea of me being that girl who couldn't live without him. But he was wrong. I finally realized that I could live better without him. It was a Friday afternoon when the news came. My inbox pinged with a subject line that made my heart stop for a moment: Jake's company, lawsuit for fraud. The email was from one of the old clients Jake used to boast about, the same ones he had convinced he was the next big thing. But now those clients had finally caught on. Jake had been using company funds for personal projects, skimming off the top, and falsely inflating his work to make it look like something it wasn't. It didn't take long for the news to spread like wildfire. The same arrogance that had once defined him, the same confidence that led him to leave me behind, was now unraveling him in front of the world. The golden boy wasn't so golden anymore. I couldn't help but feel a cold sense of satisfaction. The same man who had humiliated me, who had tried to destroy my sense of self-worth, was now being exposed for what he truly was: a fraud. A liar. The next week, I met with Tom at our favorite cafe. I hadn't told him everything about Jake, about the betrayal, the heartbreak, the emotional roller coaster I'd gone through. But now, with everything that had happened, I felt it was time. "You know, I don't think I ever realized how much Jake had hurt me," I said, swirling my coffee. "I kept waiting for him to apologize, for him to realize how wrong he was, but I was wrong for waiting." Tom smiled, taking my hand across the table. "It's never about waiting for someone else to make it right. It's about finding your own peace. Emma, you've done that, and you've done more than just survive. It's like you've come out stronger, better, and you're finally living for yourself." I felt tears sting my eyes. I had never realized how much I had needed that kind of reassurance. Jake had made me feel small, insignificant, and now I had a man sitting across from me who saw me for who I truly was. And then, just like that, the final blow came. Jake's company folded. The media had caught on to the story, and his reputation was completely destroyed. His social media accounts were flooded with hate, his clients abandoned him, and the investors who once saw him as a genius were now left scrambling. The cherry on top: a viral video of Jake trying to beg his way out of the mess, stumbling over his words in a desperate attempt to save face. It was embarrassing. It was pathetic. And I felt nothing. It wasn't long before I received another message from him. "I've messed up, Emma. I know I don't deserve a chance, but if there's any part of you that can forgive me, I want to make it right." But this time, I was done. I didn't need to respond. I didn't need to tell him how far he had fallen or how badly he had hurt me. He knew. He was fully aware of the damage he had caused. Instead, I did nothing. And that, in itself, was the ultimate revenge. As time went on, I saw Jake's life unravel in front of him. Every day was a new reminder of his fall from grace. He went from being a man who had everything: money, success, respect, to someone barely scraping by, all because of his own lies and deceit. It was a slow and painful process, and I couldn't help but feel that it was well-deserved. For once, I wasn't focused on getting revenge in the traditional sense. It wasn't about making him feel the pain I had felt. It wasn't about watching him suffer. It was about seeing him fall so far that he could never climb back up again. And the best part? I didn't have to lift a finger. A few months later, I received an invitation. It was from a high-end event for successful entrepreneurs and business leaders. It was being held at one of the most exclusive venues in the city. As I read the invitation, a thought crossed my mind. There would be a very familiar face there. But this time, I wasn't concerned. This time, I was walking in there as a woman who had earned everything she had, a woman who no longer needed to hide behind anyone else's approval. The night of the event, I arrived in style. I didn't need anyone to tell me how beautiful I looked or how successful I was. I already knew. My reputation was mine to own now. And sure enough, I saw Jake across the room. His face was gaunt, his suit too tight. He was talking to someone, but I could see the discomfort in his body language. No longer the man who had once charmed the room, he now looked like a shadow of the person I once knew. I didn't look away. I didn't feel anything. I just kept walking. Jake's eyes met mine across the room. For a split second, I saw it. The regret. The desperation. The realization that he had lost me forever. But this time, I didn't flinch. I didn't feel the sting of betrayal. I was beyond that. I was free. The best revenge, after all, wasn't about dragging someone down. It was about rising above. It was about becoming so much more than they ever imagined you could be. And as I stood there, looking at the man who had once broken me, I knew one thing for certain. He had made a terrible mistake by leaving me for her. But it was his mistake to live with. The last few months had been a whirlwind of triumph and self-discovery. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about Jake anymore. It was about me. And the woman I had become. The woman I always knew I could be, but just needed the push to fully embrace. I spent most of my days focusing on the future. My career was taking off, my social circle was thriving, and for the first time in years, I woke up every morning feeling content with who I was and where I was heading. The past was behind me, and I had no intention of ever letting it define me again. But there were moments when I would think about Jake, about how he once had it all and threw it away. How he had everything he could ever want, yet he still chose to lie, to cheat, to walk away from me without a second thought. I could feel the anger bubbling up again, but this time it wasn't a driving force. It was just a reminder of how much I had grown. The realization hit me one day as I stood in front of a mirror, adjusting my blazer before heading to a meeting. Jake's words, his dismissals, the way he made me feel like I wasn't enough, it all felt so distant now. His attempts to reach out over the past few months had been ignored. I deleted his messages without a second thought. It wasn't until I received the call from a former friend of his, a woman named Tessa, that I thought maybe, just maybe, I was meant to hear something. Tessa and I had been friendly when I was with Jake, but we weren't close. I had no idea why she was calling me now, but when her voice crackled on the other end, I felt a surge of curiosity. "Emma," she said, her voice low, almost conspiratorial. "I know you haven't spoken to Jake in a while, but I think you should know what's been happening." I raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything. "I don't know if you've heard, but he's been trying to get back in with all the people who used to admire him. He's even been sending, those heartfelt apologies to people who were in his circle, but here's the thing, he hasn't changed. He's still lying, still blaming you for everything that went wrong." I felt a bitter laugh rising in my throat, but I quickly swallowed it down. "I'm not surprised." Tessa continued, "Well, the worst part, he's got this new woman, Jessica, I think you might want to know. She's been in the picture for a while, but now she's expecting him to get her a ring. He wants to pretend everything's fine, but I think you deserve to know." That hit me harder than I expected. Not because I was angry or upset, it was just the realization that Jake had never learned. He was trying to move on with another woman, just like he had done to me. But he wasn't fixing anything. He was just making the same mistakes, all while playing the role of the victim. "I appreciate you telling me," I said, my voice calm. "But it's not my problem anymore." Tessa was quiet for a moment before replying. "I know, I just thought you should know, in case you were still curious about what happened after everything went down. You deserve the truth, Emma." I didn't respond immediately. There was nothing left to say. Later that night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, something inside me clicked. I didn't care about Jake anymore. The idea of getting back at him, of seeing him suffer, was no longer the fuel that kept me going. I had gotten everything I needed from this experience. I had grown stronger, wiser. But there was one thing I hadn't done yet, one thing I knew would give me the closure I deserved. The thought had been brewing for a while, but now I knew exactly what I had to do. I would show up at his life, uninvited. But not in the way I used to. I wouldn't be the bitter ex. I wouldn't be the one holding a grudge. No, I would show up as the woman who had moved on. The woman who was better off without him. Jake's invitation came a week later. It was one of those events that people use to pretend everything is still fine, an engagement party for him and Jessica. I laughed when I saw it. Not because it was funny, but because I had the power to choose how to react now. I wasn't going to ruin their party or make a scene. I was going to attend. To show them both that I was no longer the person they thought they could manipulate. The night of the party, I arrived looking confident and poised. I wasn't looking for approval, and I wasn't looking for apologies. I was there for me. For the woman I had become. I walked through the doors of the venue, and the silence was immediate. Jake's eyes widened when he saw me, but I kept walking, my heels clicking on the marble floor. I smiled politely, exchanging pleasantries with the guests as I made my way to the bar. I didn't acknowledge Jake. I didn't need to. This night was mine. The best part? The look on his face when he realized I wasn't there to rekindle anything. I wasn't there to beg. I wasn't there to make him feel better. I was there to show him I had moved on. And then, as the evening continued, it became clear. Jake was just a shadow of the man I once knew. His arrogance had faded. His charm was a little less effective. And most importantly, his world was no longer centered around controlling others. The last time I saw him that night, he was standing alone in a corner, staring at me. I didn't approach him. I didn't need to. I simply took a deep breath and walked away. I had won.